You said yes again. You didn't want to. You felt it in your chest, that tightening, that small sinking feeling the moment the words left your mouth. Maybe it was a favor someone asked for. Maybe it was a boundary someone crossed while you stood there smiling, pretending it was fine. And afterward, alone again, you replayed the moment. Why didn't I speak up? Why do I always let this happen? And here is what no one tells you. The problem is not that you are weak. The problem is that you are kind, and you have never been taught how to protect that kindness from people who mistake it for an open door. Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in the history of psychology, understood something about human nature that most people still haven't grasped. He knew that the people who get walked over the most are rarely the ones who lack strength. They are the ones who carry so much inner depth, so much awareness of other people's pain, that they would rather absorb the damage themselves than cause even a moment of discomfort to someone else. And Jung saw this clearly. That is not generosity. That is self-abandonment, wearing the mask of love. So, today we are going to walk through 7 strict psychological rules rooted in Jung's work. Not gentle suggestions, not vague advice, but firm, non-negotiable principles that will fundamentally change the way you move through the world. Because if you have ever left a conversation feeling smaller than when you walked in, if you have ever given so much of yourself that you forgot what was yours to begin with, then this is not just a video. This is a mirror. And by the end, you will see yourself in it more clearly than you have in a long time. Before we begin, take a moment. Subscribe, leave a comment. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you was screaming no? Tell me about it. Because I promise you, you are not alone in this. Rule number 1, stop betraying yourself to keep the peace. There is a moment that happens so quickly you almost miss it. Someone says something that bothers you, a comment at dinner, a tone in a text message, a request that feels more like a demand. And in that split second, you make a choice. You swallow it, you smile, you let it go. And you tell yourself it wasn't a big deal, that you are being the bigger person, that keeping the peace is more important than making a scene. But here is what Jung would want you to understand. Every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, you are not keeping the peace. You are keeping their peace, and you are destroying yours. Jung spoke extensively about what he called the self, the deepest, most authentic core of who you are. Not the version you perform at work, not the version you become around your family, not the carefully curated personality you show to the world. The self is what remains when all the masks come off. It is your truth. And every time you betray that truth, every time you say it's fine when it is not fine, every time you laugh at something that actually hurt you, every time you pretend to agree when you fundamentally disagree, you chip away at your connection to that self, piece by piece, day by day, until one morning you wake up and you don't even recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. And the worst part, the people around you won't notice, because you have trained them not to. You have spent years teaching everyone in your life that your feelings don't matter, that your boundaries are flexible, that you will always be the one to bend. And they believed you, not because they are cruel, but because you were so convincing. Jung said something that should stop you in your tracks. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right, because accepting yourself means accepting that your feelings are valid even when they are inconvenient. It means accepting that your discomfort matters even when expressing it might make someone else uncomfortable. It means looking at the person in the mirror and saying, I will not abandon you again, not for anyone. This is the first rule, and it is the foundation for everything that follows. You cannot build strength on a habit of self-betrayal. You cannot demand respect from others while you are busy disrespecting yourself. The peace you keep by staying silent is not peace. It is a slow, quiet erosion of everything you are, and it has to stop. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Now, because every moment you spend performing okayness is a moment stolen from your actual life. Think about it. Think about it the last time you swallowed something that hurt. Where did it go? It didn't disappear. It went into your body, your tension, your sleepless nights, your resentment. It went into that heaviness you carry but can't quite name. Jung understood this. He knew that what we refuse to express doesn't vanish. It festers. It transforms into anxiety, into depression, into sudden explosions of anger that seem to come from nowhere but actually come from everywhere, from every single moment you chose their comfort over your truth. So here is your new rule. If it costs you your peace, it is too expensive. If staying silent means betraying yourself, then silence is not golden. It is a prison, and you have been locked inside it long enough. Rule number 2, recognize the shadow in the people around you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life who was always sweet to you in public, but something about them felt wrong? Something you couldn't put your finger on? They said the right things. They smiled at the right moments. But deep down, in a place you couldn't quite articulate, you felt uneasy. You felt watched. You felt like you were standing next to someone wearing a costume, and underneath it, something else was moving. That feeling is not paranoia. That feeling is your unconscious mind doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is reading the shadow. Jung's concept of the shadow is one of the most important ideas in the history of psychology. The shadow is the part of a person that they hide, suppress, and refuse to acknowledge. It contains everything they don't want the world to see: their jealousy, their rage, their need to control, their cruelty. And here is the critical thing. The shadow doesn't disappear just because someone hides it. It leaks. It seeps through the cracks of their persona in ways they don't even realize. A backhanded compliment, a joke that cuts a little too deep, a pattern of making you feel small while insisting they are helping you, a habit of showing up with generosity that somehow always comes with strings attached. People who walk over you rarely do it with aggression. That would be too obvious. The most dangerous people in your life are the ones who do it with a smile. They are the ones who frame their control as concern, their manipulation as love, their dominance as guidance. And they get away with it because their persona, their social mask, is so polished, so convincing, that anyone who questions them looks like the unreasonable one. Jung warned about this. He said that a person who is unconscious of their shadow is the most dangerous kind of person, because they genuinely believe they are good. They have no awareness of the harm they cause. And when you try to point it out, they are shocked, offended. They turn it back on you. I was only trying to help. You're being too sensitive. I don't know why you're making this into a problem. Does that sound familiar? Here's what you need to understand. Your ability to sense the shadow in others is not a flaw. It is a gift. It is your unconscious mind protecting you, sounding an alarm that your conscious mind has been trained to ignore. Because somewhere along the way you learn that being a good person means giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. You learn that trusting your gut is being judgmental. You learn that seeing the darkness in others makes you negative or unkind. But Jung would tell you the opposite. He would tell you that refusing to see the shadow is not kindness, it is blindness. And blindness in the presence of someone else's shadow is how you end up drained, manipulated, and wondering what happened to you. So the second rule is this: trust what you feel, not just what you see. When someone's words say one thing but your body says another, listen to your body. When a relationship looks good on paper but feels heavy in your chest, honor that heaviness. You are not being paranoid. You are not being difficult. You are seeing what others refuse to see. And that clarity, uncomfortable as it is what will keep you from being walked over by people who don't even know they are doing it. And let me add one more thing. Recognizing the shadow in others does not mean hating them. It does not mean cutting everyone off or living in suspicion. It means seeing people as they truly are, not as you wish they were. It means loving with open eyes instead of closed ones. And it means knowing that you can care about someone and still protect yourself from the parts of them they haven't faced yet. Rule number 3. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You know that exhausting cycle. Someone misunderstands you. Or maybe they understand you perfectly, but they don't like what you said. So you explain, you clarify, you rephrase. You go over it again, more gently this time, choosing softer words, trying to find the perfect combination of language that will finally make them see your point. And it doesn't work. So you try again and again. And each time you explain yourself, you feel a little smaller, a little more desperate, a little more like you are on trial for a crime you didn't commit. Stop. Jung understood something about communication that most people miss entirely. He knew that real understanding between two people is not just an intellectual exchange. It is an act of psychological openness. It requires both people to be willing to see something they didn't see before. And when someone has already decided not to understand you, no amount of explaining will change that. You could hand them the most perfectly worded, emotionally intelligent explanation in human history, and they would still find a way to twist it, dismiss it, or turn it back on you. Because the problem was never your words. The problem is their willingness. Think about how much energy you have wasted in your life trying to make people understand your perspective. Think about the hours spent composing text messages, rehearsing conversations in the shower, lying awake at night, crafting the perfect argument. And think about how rarely it actually worked. Not because you were wrong, not because you were unclear, but because the person on the other end had no intention of meeting you halfway. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear in social life, and some people's personas are so rigid, so heavily defended, that any new information that challenges their view of themselves simply cannot get through. When you try to explain to a controlling person that they are being controlling, their persona rejects it instantly. When you try to tell a dismissive person that they are hurting you, their persona reframes it. You're overreacting. That's not what happened. I think you need to work on yourself. And every time you re-engage, every time you try one more time, you are not having a conversation. You are performing for someone who has already left the room. The lights are on. They are looking at you. But psychologically, they checked out the moment you said something that threatened their self-image. So here is rule number 3, and it might be one of the hardest ones to accept. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You do not need permission to protect yourself, and you do not need to convince someone that your pain is valid in order for it to be real. Your truth does not require approval. It does not require someone else to nod and say, "Yes, I see it now." If you see it, that is enough. If you feel it, that is enough. The constant need to explain yourself is not a sign of good communication. It is a sign that you still believe your feelings need to be validated by the very person who is invalidating them. And that is a trap, a psychological trap that will keep you spinning in circles until you are too exhausted to stand. So practice this. Say what you need to say, once, clearly, without cruelty, but without apology. And then stop. Let the silence do what your words cannot. Let the other person sit with what you have said. And if they choose not to understand, that is not your failure. That is their limitation. And you are not required to shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's inability to grow. Rule number 4. Withdraw your energy from people who only seek you when they need something. There is a pattern you may have noticed in your life, and once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Certain people only appear when they need something. They call when they want advice. They text when they need a favor. They show up at your door when their life is falling apart, and they need someone to hold the pieces. But when you are the one struggling, when you are the one who needs support, when you reach out from your own darkness, they are nowhere, busy, distracted, unavailable, full of excuses that sound reasonable enough to make you doubt your own disappointment. And yet you keep giving, you keep showing up, you keep being the reliable one, the steady one, the one who never says no. Because somewhere deep inside you believe that if you just give enough, they will eventually give back, that your loyalty will be rewarded, that your love will be reciprocated, that one day it will be your turn. Jung would look at this pattern and see something you might not want to hear. He would see a wound, not in them, in you. In Jungian psychology, there is a concept that is central to understanding why we attract certain dynamics into our lives. It is the idea that unresolved patterns from our early life repeat themselves in our adult relationships. If you grew up having to earn love, if affection was conditional, if you learned that being useful was the only way to be valued, then you will unconsciously seek out relationships that recreate that same dynamic. You will find people who confirm what you secretly believe about yourself, that you are only worth something when you are giving, that your value lies in what you provide, not in who you are. And the people who use you are not always villains. Some of them don't even realize what they are doing. They have simply found someone who never says no, and they have adapted to that. You trained them just like you trained yourself, not consciously, not maliciously. But the pattern is there, running quietly in the background like a program you forgot you installed. So the 4th rule is this: pay attention to who is in your life when you have nothing to offer. Pay attention to who calls when you are not useful. Pay attention to who shows up when the only thing you need is presence. Not a problem solver, not a therapist, not a fixer, just a human being who says, I'm here. Those are your people. Everyone else is visiting, and withdrawing your energy from the visitors is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is you finally deciding that your time, your attention, your emotional labor, these are not infinite resources to be distributed to anyone who asks. They are precious, they are yours, and they deserve to go to people who value them, not just consume them. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this is one of those unconscious patterns that disguises itself as virtue. You call it loyalty. You call it loyalty. You call it being a good friend. You call it love. But underneath it is an old wound repeating itself, whispering, if I stop giving, I will be abandoned. And the liberation begins when you whisper back, if they leave when I stop giving, they were never really here. Rule number 5. Reclaim your anger. It is not your enemy. Let us talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Your anger. Not someone else's anger. Yours. That feeling you have been suppressing for years, maybe decades. That fire in your gut that rises when someone disrespects you, takes advantage of you, or treats you like you don't matter. That heat behind your eyes that you blink away because you have been told over and over that anger is ugly. That anger is dangerous. That good people don't get angry. That spiritual people transcend it. That mature people rise above it. So you pushed it down. You buried it under kindness, under patience, under understanding. You swallowed it so many times that you forgot it was there. And now, instead of feeling it, you feel something else. Fatigue, numbness, a low, constant hum of resentment that colors everything but never quite surfaces. Or maybe it does surface, but at the wrong times, in the wrong ways. You snap at someone who doesn't deserve it. You cry when you meant to speak. You implode when what you really need to do is explode. Jung had a radical perspective on anger, one that the modern world still struggles to accept. He did not see anger as a problem to be solved or an emotion to be managed. He saw it as a messenger, a signal from the deepest part of your psyche that something is wrong, that a boundary has been violated, that yourself has been compromised, that something sacred in you has been touched by someone who had no right to touch it. In Jungian terms, anger lives in the shadow. And when you suppress it, when you refuse to acknowledge it, it doesn't go away. It transforms. It becomes passive aggression. It becomes self-sabotage. It becomes depression, which Jung himself described as anger turned inward. It becomes that strange, hollow feeling of being disconnected from your own life, going through the motions but never quite feeling alive. And here is the part that might surprise you. Your anger, the real anger, the keen anger that rises in the moment of injustice. That anger is not destructive, it is protective. It is the psychological equivalent of your immune system. When a virus enters your body, your immune system doesn't politely ask it to leave. It attacks, it fights, it defends. And your anger is designed to do the same thing for your psyche. It is the force that says, no, this is not acceptable. You will not treat me this way. But somewhere along the way, someone taught you that this force was wrong. Maybe it was a parent who punished you for expressing frustration. Maybe it was a culture that rewarded compliance and punished assertiveness. Maybe it was a relationship where your anger was weaponized against you, turned into proof that you were the problem. And so you learn the most dangerous lesson a person can learn. You learn to fear your own power. So the fifth rule is this: stop treating your anger as something to overcome and start treating it as something to understand. When it rises, don't push it down. Don't perform calmness. Don't rush to forgive before you have even allowed yourself to feel. Instead, ask it a question. What are you protecting? What boundary was crossed? What part of me is saying enough? Because here is the truth that Jung understood and that the world keeps trying to bury. A person without access to their anger is a person without access to their power. And a person without access to their power is a person who will be walked over again and again by anyone who senses that they won't fight back. Reclaiming your anger does not mean becoming aggressive. It does not mean yelling or lashing out or becoming the kind of person who hurts others. It means reconnecting with your right to say no with force. It means allowing yourself to feel displeasure without immediately trying to fix it or smooth it over. It means standing in a room and letting people feel the weight of your refusal without softening it for their comfort. That is not cruelty. That is integrity. And for some of you, it will feel terrifying at first because you have spent your whole life making sure no one ever felt uncomfortable around you. But Comfort is not your responsibility. Your wholeness is. And you cannot be whole while half of your emotional spectrum is locked in a cage. Rule number 6, stop shrinking yourself to make others feel tall. There is something you do, and you may not even realize you do it. You dim yourself. In conversations, in relationships, in rooms full of people, you hold back your opinions. You downplay your achievements. You make yourself smaller, quieter, less visible, not because you lack confidence, but because at some point you learned that being too much, too smart, too successful, too opinionated, too bright makes other people uncomfortable. And you decided, unconsciously, that their comfort was more important than your full expression. Maybe you learned it in childhood when a parent responded to your excitement with indifference or criticism. Maybe you learned it in a friendship where your success was met with jealousy instead of celebration. Maybe you learned it in a relationship where your partner needed to be the impressive one, the smart one, the one in control, and your job was to orbit, to support, to applaud, but never to shine on your own. And so you developed a habit, a deeply ingrained, almost invisible habit of making yourself less. You don't raise your hand even though you know the answer. You credit other people for your ideas. You apologize before you speak. You laugh off compliments. You say it was nothing when it was everything. You shrink and shrink and shrink until you can fit neatly into the space other people have decided you deserve. Jung understood this dynamic intimately. He wrote about how the process of individuation, of becoming your true self, inevitably creates tension with the people around you. Because when you begin to grow into who you actually are, not everyone will welcome it. Some will feel threatened. Some will feel left behind. Some will actively try to pull you back down, not necessarily out of malice, but out of their own fear that your growth exposes their stagnation. And here is the painful truth that Jung did not shy away from. Sometimes the people who want you to stay small are the people closest to you, your family, your partner, your oldest friends, not because they don't love you, but because the version of you they are comfortable with is the version that doesn't challenge them, the version that stays quiet, the version that doesn't ask for more, the version that makes them feel safe by remaining predictable and contained. But you are not a container. You are a living, evolving being. And every time you shrink yourself to manage someone else's insecurity, you commit an act of violence against your own potential. Not a loud violence, a quiet one, the kind that leaves no bruise but hollows you out from the inside until one day you realize you don't even know who you would be if you allowed yourself to be fully seen. So, the 6th rule is this. Your light is not an insult to anyone else's darkness. You do not owe anyone your smallness. You do not need to whisper just because someone else is afraid of volume. If your growth makes someone uncomfortable, that discomfort belongs to them, not to you. And carrying it for them is not love. It is a cage you have built with your own hands and called devotion. Start noticing when you shrink. Start catching yourself in the act. The moment you downplay a success, the moment you hold back a thought because it might be too much, the moment you rearrange yourself to fit someone else's expectation of who you should be. Notice it, name it, and then, even if it feels dangerous, even if your voice shakes, take up the space anyway. Because Jung knew something that people pleasers and chronic shrinkers desperately need to hear. The world does not need you to be less. The world needs you to be less. The world needs you to be all of what you are. And the people who truly love you, who truly deserve a place in your life, will not be threatened by your fullness. They will be inspired by it. They will breathe easier in the presence of someone who is finally, unapologetically themselves. And the people who cannot handle your light, they are not your people. They were only ever comfortable with your shadow, and you were not born to live in someone else's shade. Rule number 7, learn to sit in the discomfort of being disliked. This is the rule that ties everything together. This is the one that makes all the other rules possible. Because you can know all 6 of the previous principles by heart. You can understand them intellectually, agree with them completely, and still fail to live them. And the reason is almost always the same. You cannot bear the thought of someone not liking you. It sits there, doesn't it? Somewhere in your chest. That quiet terror that if you speak your truth, if you hold your boundary, if you say no, if you stop shrinking, if you reclaim your anger, if you stop over-explaining yourself, someone will turn away, someone will be disappointed, someone will think you are selfish or cold or difficult or unkind. And for some of you, that possibility is so unbearable that you would rather spend your entire life being walked over than risk a single person's disapproval. Jung saw this with devastating clarity. He understood that the need to be liked is one of the deepest and most imprisoning forces in the human psyche. It is not vanity. It is not superficiality. It is survival. Because as children, being liked was not a preference. It was a necessity. Your parents' approval meant safety. Their disapproval meant danger. Love was not guaranteed. It had to be earned, performed, maintained. And your entire nervous system organized itself around one primal goal. Make sure they don't turn away. And now, decades later, that same program is still running. Every time you abandon yourself to please someone, every time you betray your truth to keep someone close, every time you betray your truth to keep someone close, every time you say yes when you mean no, you are not making an adult decision. You are obeying a child's fear, the fear that if I am truly myself, I will be left alone. And that fear, though it once kept you safe, is now the very thing that keeps you imprisoned. Jung called this the process of bringing the unconscious into consciousness. And this is perhaps the most important unconscious into consciousness. And this is perhaps the most important unconscious pattern you will ever face. The belief that your worth depends on other people's approval. The belief that being disliked means being unworthy. The belief that rejection is the same thing as annihilation. It is not. And the moment you truly understand that, everything changes. Because here's what happens when you stop needing everyone to like you. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing. You stop chasing people who have shown you through their actions that they don't value you. You stop bending yourself into shapes that hurt just to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. And in the silence that follows, in that terrifying open space where the applause used to be, something extraordinary happens. You meet yourself, maybe for the first time, and you discover that the person standing there, the real one, the unperformed one, the one without the mask and the apologies and the endless accommodation, that person is someone worth knowing, someone worth protecting, someone worth being. Jung said that individuation is not a comfortable process. It requires you to let go of who you have been in order to become who you actually are. And that means some people will fall away, some people will be confused, some people will be angry because the version of you that served them, the compliant version, the agreeable version, the one who never made waves, that version is dying. And not everyone will mourn it gracefully, but you will know deep in your bones that what is being born is more real than anything you have ever been. And that is worth more than every hollow smile you have ever forced, every boundary you have ever surrendered, every piece of yourself you have ever given away to someone who never even asked you to stay. Now, let me tell you something. If you have made it this far, that tells me something about you. It tells me you are tired, not physically, psychologically, spiritually. You are tired of playing a role that doesn't fit, tired of pouring from a cup that no one refills, tired of being everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. And I want you to sit with something for a moment, a kind of inventory, not of what you have, but of what you have given away. Think about the relationships where you did all the work, the friendships where you were always the one reaching out, always the one adjusting, always the one apologizing, even when you did nothing wrong. Think about the conversations where you left feeling empty, where someone talked at you for an hour and never once asked how you were doing. Think about the times you were in pain and no one noticed because you had gotten so good at hiding it. All of that cost you something. It cost you time. It cost you energy. It cost you pieces of your identity that you may not even remember losing. And the question Jung would ask you is not, how do you get those pieces back? The question is, are you willing to stop giving them away? Because this is where it gets real. Everything I've shared with you today is useless if you walk away from this video and go right back to the same patterns. If you say yes to the next person who should hear a no, if you explain yourself one more time to someone who has already decided you are wrong, if you shrink in the next room you walk into, if you swallow your anger because it might inconvenience someone, if you perform okayness while your soul is screaming for rest, nothing changes until you change. And change is not a single dramatic moment. It is a series of small, almost invisible decisions made over and over in the quiet moments that no one sees. It is the moment you feel the urge to apologize for existing and you don't. The moment someone pushes your boundary and you hold it without flinching. The moment you feel your anger rise and instead of shoving it down, you let it speak. The moment someone is disappointed in you and you allow it, you just allow it without rushing to fix it. Those moments are where the real work happens, not in grand declarations, not in dramatic confrontations, but in the silent, private seconds where you choose yourself over someone else's comfort. That is the battlefield. And every time you hold your ground, even trembling, even terrified, you become a little more unbreakable. Jung described individuation as the central task of human life, not happiness, not success, not approval. Individuation, becoming whole, becoming the person you were before the world told you who to be. And that process requires exactly what we have talked about today. It requires you to stop betraying yourself, to see people clearly, to stop over-explaining, to protect your energy, to reclaim your anger, to refuse to shrink, and to sit with your whole body and soul in the discomfort of being disliked. That is not easy, but it is necessary. And if you are honest with yourself, you already know that. You have known it for a long time. The only question is whether today is the day you finally start acting on what you know. There is an image that Jung returned to throughout his life, the image of a person standing at a threshold. Behind them is everything familiar, the roles they have played, the masks they have worn, the relationships built on accommodation instead of authenticity. And ahead of them is something unknown, uncertain, uncharted. A life lived on their own terms, in their own voice, at their own volume. Most people stand at that threshold their entire lives. They look out at the unknown and they feel the pull, the deep, ancient pull towards something more real. But the fear holds them. The fear of rejection, the fear of loneliness, the fear that if they step through, everything they have built will crumble. And maybe some of it will. Maybe some relationships will not survive your transformation. Maybe some people will not recognize the person you are becoming. Maybe the world will feel disorienting for a while, like walking through a house where all the furniture has been rearranged in the dark. But you will find your footing. You will, because the person on the other side of that threshold is not a stranger. It is you, the real you. The one who has been waiting patiently, quietly for years for you to stop performing and start arriving. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I believe that. I believe it with everything in me. But I also believe that becoming who you truly are requires something that no one talks about. It requires grief. Grief for the version of yourself that kept the peace at any cost. Grief for the years spent in rooms where you were present but not seen. Grief for the kindness that was exploited, the boundaries that were crossed, the anger that was buried alive. That grief is not weakness. It is the doorway. And walking through it is the bravest thing you will ever do. So here is what I want to leave you with. Not advice, not a to-do list, just this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to be angry, to be inconvenient, to be difficult, to be too much. You are allowed to say no and offer no explicit effect. You are allowed to walk away from anyone who makes you feel small. You are allowed to close your door, turn off your phone, and exist in the quiet mercy of your own company. And you are allowed to do all of this without guilt, without apology, without earning it first by suffering enough. Because your life is not a performance. Your kindness is not a currency. And your soul is not a resource to be extracted by anyone who happens to need it. You are a whole person. Act like one, starting now. If something in this video moved you, if you felt seen or understood, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment. Tell me which rule hit you the hardest. Tell me what you are going to do differently starting today. I read every single one, and I am listening. Until next time, take care of yourself. Not because no one else will, but because you deserve the kind of care that only you know how to give.